All right, so I'm back for take two. The last live I started, it popped up with that error code and then my screen went dark, and so not sure what was happening, but I am Emily Roth and I'm here with Weathered Hearts, or I'm the owner of Weathered Hearts. I just wanted to hop on here and do a live to address some questions I've received in the past week regarding Apoxie Sculpt, IOD molds, and different furniture painting tips. So I just wanted to create a live so that I could go over all of those and answer any questions that you may have. If you hop on and you have any questions, feel free to comment, and I would love to answer those questions the best that I can. If you see a red live at the top, that means that I am live. If you don't see that, then you're watching the replay, so let me know if you're watching the replay. So first of all, this is the piece that I'm working on. This is the chest to that giant dresser that I just finished. And sorry that my camera is so far away and kind of up at a weird angle, but my tripod only goes so high, so I had to set it up on my desk all the way across the room. So hopefully it doesn't keep going blurry and trying to focus. But this is the chest. I'm having some issues with this top drawer. It was warped. I fixed most of the warp. It still is just a little bit warped, but the trim piece in the middle, it had a crack in it when I got it, and I didn't realize at the time that it actually bows down. And so I've tried to think of any way that I could fix that, but honestly, I'm at a loss right now of what I can do. I could try to make it a top shelf, but it's not going to be straight. It's going to bow in the middle. So I have a new idea of what I think I'm going to do with this piece, and it's just going to be a faux drawer on top. But I'm hoping to add something kind of unique and make it useful. But what I'm going to be doing is filling the holes on both sides for the handles, and then I'm going to be using Apoxie Sculpt and IOD molds, and I'm going to be making a like a little faux keyhole for the middle. That way it's not going to look abnormal with all of the other drawers having the handles, but I don't like having handles on faux drawers necessarily because it makes you think that you can open it, and it's kind of misleading. So I just wanted to take those out, add the keyhole, and then I'm going to add those same details to the side using the Apoxie Sculpt and IOD molds. So let's see here. Do I have anybody on here with me? I have 3 people watching. If you're here, feel free to say hi. Let me know you're watching. Let's see. Oops. So this is one of the IOD molds I'm going to be using, and I'm going to be using the center keyhole. Actually, it'll be that way when I put it on. So that's going to go in the center of the top drawer, and then this is the other IOD mold I'm using, and I'm going to be making 4 of these to go on the corners up at the top, and then underneath the bottom part that comes out as well. Hey Marie, hey Pam, or Pamela, thank you for joining. So I'm going to be showing you how to use Apoxie Sculpt and molds. I've done it in a couple of my other lives, but I figured I can go and do it again since I have a lot of new people on my page. I have received numerous questions regarding Apoxie Sculpt and IOD molds, so I just want to go over it one more time. So I'm going to grab my stuff here. By the way, this is the nightstand that goes to the piece, and I still need to fix the bottom drawer and add another handle to that. But that's going to be the next one I'm working on. Okay, it is Pam. I never know. It's kind of one of those names where you can go for like the abbreviated name, or some people don't like that. So you never know. Pull chair over here. Okay, so I have my Apoxie Sculpt, and please tell me if you guys can't see very well. I can try to bring down my tripod and reposition it. Actually, maybe I should do that because I can't even see the comments. So if you guys are asking anything, I could be able to see it. So I'm I try to move this real slow here so I don't make anybody dizzy. So just bear with me for 1 second. Woo. Okay. Let's see here if that is a little bit better. I'm sorry, it's a little shaky. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. You guys can see what I'm going to be working on. So I have my Apoxie Sculpt, and when you purchase Apoxie Sculpt, you get a part A and a part B. And so you have to mix 50-50 part A and part B to activate it, which will eventually harden. So they send you this. This is the 4 pounds, so this goes a long ways. They also have, I think it's a 1 pound, and they come in smaller containers. And honestly, it looks like not a whole lot, but it does still go a long ways. And so I'm going to show you just like the little bit that I'm going to be using. But you want to use gloves with the Apoxie Sculpt. So you want 1 glove for part A and 1 glove for part B. That way I'm not sticking my hands in both and activating inside the containers or contaminating. So I'm going to do part A first. And this, by the way, is the white color. So I've taken pictures of the natural color, which has almost like a greenish hue to it. And this is, and these gloves are like enormous because they're my husband's and I got them from his pocket. But this is the white. And so this is part A. And I'm just gonna mix probably about this much to begin with. And then I can always mix more, but if you over mix, then you're just wasting it. So I like to kind of start out with a smaller bit. So then I have a new glove for part B. Now this is what the natural color looks more like. So that's the white, and that's what all of the natural color looks like. But once I mix white with that color, the part B, it'll make it all the white tone. So I just like to eyeball it and get the best that I can mixture-wise, 50-50. Oh, I'm getting messages here. Good morning, Amisha. I don't know why Facebook won't let me change my business page. Oh, it's all right. That's the code. All right, let me know if I'm still live. I have no idea why it keeps doing that. I have good internet, a strong connection here, but it keeps wanting to disconnect for some reason, and hopefully it's not all blurry. That's a lot better, thanks. Okay, perfect. So grab just a little bit more of this part B. Okay, that should be good. Now you can use gloves the whole time. I usually don't. I just wash my hands afterwards really well. I'll set that to the side. I'll kind of roll part A and part B so I can show you the amount that I'm using. It's got part A and part B. I may have a little bit more part B, but it's pretty close enough. So I'm just going to start mixing this. And this actually still might be too much. I'm still trying to learn how much to use, but usually once I get to the end, if I do have to toss any, it's usually just a small amount. Hi Jackie, thank you for joining in. I can still see you. Okay, perfect. Oh man, how is everybody's Friday morning going? Mine was going good until I realized that this is going to be an issue. So now I've been problem solving all morning, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. But I'm hoping that my new plan, I don't want to say what my new plan is yet, because if it fails, then I'm just going to have to figure something else out. But if it works out, then I think you guys are going to be like, oh, that's an awesome idea. And maybe I'll try that. So we'll see. You want to mix this really, really well. And I know that you can spray, I think it's like cooking spray or something like that. There's a few different techniques that I've heard, but what I do is I'm going to put it in the mold and make sure that it's pretty flat. I don't want any like sticking up over the mold, so it's like bubbled, I guess, because when you put that on, you're going to have to really press the edges down to get it to adhere. I don't know how to explain it. But if like the center is like thicker than the rest, then when you press down on the sides a lot harder, then you might end up messing up some of that detail or leaving small little fingerprints, which you can always fix that. But I like to add even a little bit less than what would cover this whole mold. So when you look at it from the side, that way I can form it around my piece without having to really press down hard on it. It's probably really confusing, but it makes sense in my head. Oh gosh, I'm so bad with names. Yolanda? Thank you, I really appreciate that. Please correct me if I said your name wrong. Can you make an extra mold with your leftovers to use on a different piece? Yes, you can. This dries extremely to like a very hard finish. It's not like paper clay where it kind of has like that bendability to it. So if you have a piece that isn't completely flat, or you don't dry it completely flat, then you'll have problems when you're trying to put it on your new piece of it not sitting flat, or if you're trying to curve it, it's not going to be able to be curved at all. Also, when it's wet or not dry, because I guess not like fully wet, but it's tacky, you can place it on whatever you're putting it on, and it's going to adhere. You don't have to glue it at all, which is nice, because I get wood glue everywhere, and then it's a pain in the butt to try to paint over and everything else. So this has kind of been the best option that I've found for these molds so far. But I've used these for even like drawer pulls, because they make, oh, I don't have them near me, but they make different molds that kind of have like the curvy long pieces that you could put like a knob in the middle for a drawer pull. And I've used Apoxie Sculpt for that, and it was extremely durable and a very hard finish. You got it right, okay. I'm so bad with one, remembering names, and then two, pronouncing names. It's just not my strong suit. I feel like, have you guys ever seen the movie The House Bunny? I know it's kind of an older movie, and it was like one of those like teenage chick flick type of movies, but that part where she meets all the girls and she like repeats their name, and she's like, Carrie Mae, like in like a deep like demon voice. I feel like I need to do that to like remember people's names. So this will dry completely in about 24 hours, but you have a window of like being able to work with it and kind of really maneuver it around that I think it's like two hours maybe. I don't know, but I try to work with it as quickly as possible. Usually it'll start to harden. You can remix it and try to soften it up a little bit, but I try to work as quickly as I can with it. So I have this. It's in there really well. There's just one little area there that's kind of bubbled up just a tiny bit, but other than that, it's pretty flat. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna put this in my freezer, like on the shelf, and I'm gonna let it sit there for about 3 minutes. That way it's gonna harden, and then I can just bend away and it's gonna pop right out. So hang on one quick second. All right, so now it is sitting on the shelf of my freezer. Will you post the link, please? I bought the molds and you did for the pumpkins. The link for the Apoxie Sculpt. Pam, is that what you need? Awesome tutorial. Thank you, Laura. Showing how to use molds to add character to your furniture. Yes, so I'm gonna be adding these to my piece in just 1 second. I just have to wait for it to harden in the freezer for approximately 3 minutes. It really doesn't have to sit in there too long. So now I'm working on the keyhole. And I like to break off little pieces and just do it in small sections because it's easier to add more than it is to try to scoop it away. Okay, yes, to the Apoxie Sculpt. I can add that after, or I'll post it on my page after I finish up this video. I forgot to pin the link, so I don't think there's a way for me to do it now because I have to clip that link first and then I can pin it. All right. So that is my keyhole. And again, if you look at it from the side, there's none sticking out of the mold. So I'm gonna run and throw this in the freezer also for 3 minutes real quick. All right, so now I'm going to show you some other ways that you can use this. If you have any chipping veneer on a piece of furniture, you can use this to fill it, and it comes to such a hard finish that, I mean, you can sand it. What I recommend doing is try to get it as flat as you can when you're putting it on the piece, and then if you have to sand it, you're going to have to use like a high, or a, is it a high grit or a low grit, like a 80 grit or something like that, something that's a very strong grit, because this does dry so hard. Sometimes what I like to do is I will wait until it starts to really harden, usually not the full 24 hours because at that point it's completely hard, but I like to hit it before it's fully dry. That way I kind of can sand it and work at it a little bit easier than when it's fully dry, because you really need to work at it. I've used a Dremel before because that's a little bit more high powered than a sander is, and that worked well. But I'm going to use this to fill these holes. Open it up so that I can press on the back also, so it doesn't go all the way through. I wake up super early because my husband leaves for work at about 4:30 in the morning. So I wake up with him every morning and I pack his lunch and make him coffee. So I'm used to being up at 4 a.m. all the time. And I always want to go live like around 7 a.m. because then I've had like my morning coffee and I've had something to eat by then. So I'm like awake and like ready to go. And I have to keep reminding myself that nobody else wakes up that early and nobody's going to be on here to watch me. I'm such a good wife. Yeah, you better believe that. When we first moved to Georgia, we had to move in with my husband's parents for about 6 months, I believe it was, because we were having our house built here. And I didn't wake up with my husband that early then, so I was just like, you can wake up and get ready and everything like that. I feel like it was because it wasn't my house, so I felt weird like going out into the kitchen, and like I didn't want to be too loud and wake anybody up. And so he was responsible for packing his own lunch and everything like that when we lived with his parents. And then there was a time when he let our dogs out to go potty, and it was like 4 o'clock in the morning before he left for work. And I realized, I woke up like half an hour later and I realized that only one of the dogs was inside with me. And so I like tried to quietly go through the house and figure out where the other dog was. And he left my dog outside in the dark at 4 o'clock in the morning. And somehow he did not run away, thank goodness. But after that point, then I was like, wait, were you even awake when you left? Like, how do you just forget the dog outside? And sure enough, he was like so tired. He's like, I don't even remember getting to work in the morning. So after that, I was like, okay, I'm waking up with you and I'm making sure that you're fully awake, that you have your coffee, and like, I'm gonna have like a full-on conversation with you before you leave in the morning to make sure that, one, you don't leave our dogs outside alone when you leave, and two, you don't fall asleep at the wheel. Alright, so I have those pretty much filled. There's a couple areas where I can tell I'll probably have to add a little bit of wood filler, just because I don't want to sit here forever trying to get it exactly perfect, but it's easier to add a tiny bit of wood filler over the top of this to fix any of those little indents in the Apoxie Sculpt than it is to fully wood fill one of these holes, because it's going to take forever to dry and it's never going to be as durable as the epoxy finishes. So I filled that. It's probably been about 3 minutes, I think. So I'm going to run and grab those molds. I'm tired, but my husband still gets up by 5 every morning. I feel like that's going to be me. I'm like very much a morning person. My husband is not. He'll sleep in until noon if I let him. Perfect time for us on the East Coast. It's 11:30 here in Georgia. Yes, I'm here in Georgia also, so I try to go live around like the lunchtime. That way everybody here is usually awake on the East Coast, and then the Central and West Coast and everything like that. Usually people are starting to wake up, or maybe they're at work and they have their first break or whatnot. But I'm trying to, I guess, fit in my lives to better suit everybody else, because the best time for me is not the best time for everybody else. You're an early bird too, yes. Let me run and grab those molds real fast out of the freezer. All right, just kidding, they need a little bit longer to sit in there. They weren't quite ready. I think, so this one, the white Apoxie Sculpt that I have is newer than the natural greenish colored one that I have. So I think this one, it definitely is a lot easier to work with. So it probably is going to need a little bit longer of a time to dry, versus like if I already had this sitting out here that long, for that one that it's over 3 years old at this point, and I've stuck my hands in both and mixed them and wasn't careful. So they've kind of started reacting and contaminating in the containers. So I don't have as long of a work time with those. Let's see here. Amy, where in Georgia are you? I'm outside Atlanta. I am in the Savannah, Georgia area. Get up early, fix coffee. He's spoiled. Yes. Pamela, mine too. Hey, Roxanne. Okay, so while I wait for that to harden a little bit more, let's see here. I'm trying to think of the questions that I've received that I should go over. Prepping, I know I kind of talked about it in my last video, but I'll go over it again real fast for anybody who didn't see that. So I like to use Dixie Belle White Lightning to prep my pieces. So usually what I do is I will sand first. I know a lot of chalk-based paints, or chalk style, mineral style, clay style paints, they don't necessarily require any prep. I just like to prep a little bit more because I've had pieces that the paint didn't adhere very well to, and that could have been for a ton of different reasons, but I like to just pre-prep all of my pieces. That way I know that it's going to be durable at the end. So I will take a 150 or 220 grit sandpaper, depending on how rough the surface already is. So this one only needed a 220 grit. And I took that 220 grit, I sanded just lightly the whole entire piece, just hand sanded, just kind of really scored the surface. I didn't use a sander, I didn't get in all of the cracks or anything like that, but just for the majority of it, I wanted to make sure that that shine wasn't going to be an issue. So I do that, and then I go in with my White Lightning, which it's a bunch of little like powdered granules in there. And so for, I think it's a gallon, you're supposed to use, yeah, per gallon, use 2 heaping tablespoons of White Lightning. I never do a gallon, I do about half that. And a little bit of this really goes a long ways. So I do that. I like to wear gloves because it is like a TSP cleaner. There's chemicals in it, so I wear gloves and I fully wipe down my whole piece. I get in all of the cracks and really get, sometimes I'll go over it twice even if like the rag keeps coming back like really dirty every wipe that I do. So I do that once it's finished drying, or I guess it doesn't even really have to be dry, but I clean out my bucket that I use with this. I clean out my rag with a little bit of Dawn dish soap, and then I rinse that away, and then I get just water, and I come back with water and just wipe it all down again to make sure that I remove any of the excess cleaner that was on there. At that point, then I am good to paint once it's fully dry. So I let it dry sometimes for a few hours, sometimes it's overnight, just to make sure that everything is fully dry. And then if you're still not sure if it's sanded down enough, what you can do is you can do like a little test area with some paint, and then let it sit, let that dry, and then go back through with your nail and scratch at it. If it has a problem with coming off, then it's not going to be durable. No matter how many coats of paint you put on it, or even different types of sealers, it's still not going to fully be as durable as it could be. That dresser that I just finished, that I let it, the paint strips that I tested, I let that dry for probably 2 hours, and then by the time that I went back to scratch at it, nothing was coming off at all, and I literally wore my nail down trying to scratch at it just to make sure. So I like to pre-prep my pieces, and that's just my personal preference. So I do that, and then I use, for this dresser, it is, or in the other dresser, the set, for this medium brownish color, I've used 3 coats of Dixie Belle Fluff. With white paint, you do have to add, or you do have to do a little bit more coats, just because it's not, with a darker paint, if you paint over this brown, you're not going to be able to see the brown underneath necessarily, or you just add less coats. But with white, you really have to add a lot more. This paint does go an extremely long ways. So I can paint with a 16 ounce. I can easily paint this chest, that big 9-drawer dresser, and this nightstand, and probably still have some extra. So it really does go a long ways. You just have to kind of play around with it and see how far you can make it go, or how far you can stretch it. I also have my ultra fine mist sprayer that I got from Hobby Lobby, and I've seen people who will spray the paint on their pieces. With Dixie Belle, I don't like to do that. I just haven't had the best of luck with doing that, I guess. If I spray too much water, then I'll get like little like water drop looking areas when I try to paint back over it or run a paintbrush back over it. So I like to get my brush damp with the sprayer, not spray it directly on my piece. And so when I get my brush damp, when I spread the paint on, it really just glides off the brush, and it's like a seamless line all the way across. You don't see any of the brush lines or ridges that it creates. I also like to use either fully synthetic brushes or partial synthetic, so like the I think it's half natural, half synthetic, is the Paint Pixie number 12 brush that I have. That one has been my go-to brush lately. I know that Dixie Belle just came out with a synthetic line, and so I really want to try those. But that is another tip. If you don't want any of those brush strokes, try to get a synthetic brush, because the bristles are a lot softer. Grab my brush here. Let's see here. I haven't used any of the molds. Oh, they're so nice to use. I mean, you can add so many different details. You can add trim, you can add the handle pulls, you can add little keyholes. There's so much that you can do with those molds. Hey Penny, hey Lori. Oh, thank you for sharing to 2 groups and to your page. Do you spray your brush before you dip into the paint or after the paint is on? Usually I spray before, but it really doesn't make a difference if you spray before or after. You just have to be careful if you spray after the paint's on there that you don't add too much water. Sorry, to the paint that is on your brush, because it can drip off onto your floor or wherever you're painting. So I usually like to just do it before and then dip my damp brush in the container and then spread it on. Also, something that I've done in the past is I'll add a little bit of water to this and mix it up really well. But it's easier to add water to your brush than to the container, because if you add a little too much, then you're going to have to get another container of the paint, like an 8 ounce or something like that, just to add a little bit more paint back to it to make it the right consistency. I like the Dixie Belle brush. Haven't used the new synthetic ones yet. Yes, so I had the round Dixie Belle brushes, the natural bristle, and I did like those, but for a natural bristle versus a synthetic, the bristles don't break down or not nearly as fast as natural bristle brushes, and so I like having long bristles on my brushes because it makes it a lot easier to move around. It makes it a lot softer. When you're using natural bristle brushes, in my experience, when you use it too much and then the bristles will start to break and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it's like to the point where you're scratching your paint. You're not brushing it on. Hey Tammy, thank you for joining. So this is my Paint Pixie number 12, and this has had quite a bit of use to it. So the bristles have gotten a tiny bit shorter, but like I said, I like brushes that have those long bristles. It's very easy to move around. It's very, very soft, no matter really how much you use it. And so I use this for every single piece. I have that. I also even have this, it was like a cheap, I want to say maybe $3 brush that I got at Lowe's, and it is synthetic, but the bristles are really long and it's just a flat brush. And so I like to use this sometimes to get in like any of the detailed areas. Also, a good thing about long bristles is in between the drawers, like on the bottom, I don't like taking my drawers out when I paint. So when I get paint on my paintbrush, I can kind of stick it almost in there a little bit in the cracks, and it's going to spread paint further back. So you're not going to see that wood when you're looking at the drawers from any sort of angle. It's going to get all of that wood as far back as you can see without you having to pull your drawers out and paint all the way around them. Yes, I love Paint Pixie brushes. How many coats of paint do you use? How thin and thick? So I use, this is only 2 coats of paint, but I'm going to add 1 more coat just because there's some areas where I can see where there's more paint and then some areas where there's a little bit less paint. And I like it to all be just seamless all the way across, like a flawless finish. So for white, I usually do 3 coats. Sometimes if it's a darker wood or there's details underneath, like I did a piece that had flowers on it, and you could see those flowers over or under the 3 coats, and so I did 1 extra coat just to make sure that it fully covered all of that. But white paint requires more coats than colored paint or darker paints. And then for coat thinness, the first coat I do a very thin coat, and then the second and the third coat I can do like just a normal coat. I don't like to really cake on my paint. Dixie Belle is self-leveling for the most part, so you really don't have to worry too much about getting too much on, but I like to add a little bit of water just so the paint doesn't cake up in my brush. And then it keeps it smooth all the way across and really helps to disperse the paint versus it kind of globbing up or being like in one area, I guess. Thank you, Sheila, for sharing. Does the dresser have a specific name for that style? So this style, I believe, is a French Provençal style. And so it has all of those kind of ridges and curves to it. It has the details along the sides. It has like the little curved feet at the bottom. But I believe this is a French Provençal piece. I'm not very good with furniture names, so hopefully I got that right. Let's see what else. Top coats. So different top coats that I use. I've used Dixie Belle Clear Coat and Satin. They also have different finishes. They have, I think, a glossy clear coat, and they also have a matte clear coat. But I like the satin because it is still very, very close to matte, but it almost just gives it just a little tiny bit of like that buffed look that you would get with a wax. That gives it just a little bit of sparkle, not like you're going to look on it and it's going to reflect whatever you're looking at. It's not like extremely glossy. It's kind of the perfect finish. Thank you, April. You're welcome, Sheila. I have also used the Minwax polyacrylic, and I've used that in matte, which the matte for the Minwax polyacrylic sealer is very close to the satin finish. So I use that for the more durable surfaces that I need, such as a tabletop or a piece that's going to be in like a high traffic area or a kid's room or chairs. I like to use the polyacrylic because it has a harder finish to it. Dixie Belle also has gator hide, which I haven't tried yet, but that's like a polyacrylic sealer. And then I've used their wax line. So I've used the Dixie Belle Best Dang Wax in black, and that's, I mean, it's nice to use to add like dimension. You get into all the detail and it really makes it pop. You can make a piece look very aged with that, kind of like grungy, I guess. And then I also have tried their clear matte spray wax. And this again is, it says matte, but matte and satin are very, very similar finishes. And so this is what I used on that dresser, the matching dresser that I just finished, was this. All you have to do is you just hold it, I hold it about a foot above my piece, and you just spray a couple sprays, not to add too much. And then I take a clean rag, like a lint-free rag, and I just blend it all in. And then you can go back and add more coats if you want, just to make sure that the whole piece is totally covered, because with it being clear, you can't really tell until, I guess, once it dries and you look at it from like the side, then you can see some areas that the paint may be more matte than the wax. Do you use any other brands? Yeah, so I use, I use the Minwax. I use, Debbie's Design Diary. I've used that wax, the clear wax. And that is a little bit softer than Dixie Belle's, like their canned wax, I guess, like the Best Dang wax. DIY's kind of goes on a little bit smoother and like butterier, I guess. It almost looks like it's a little bit more oily, but not in a bad way. Like it's a good kind of like oily, like it gives it a little bit of a shine. But I like using Debbie's Design Diary specifically on DIY paint, or if I'm doing a painting and I want those colors to pop, then I'll use the DIY wax for that, and it works really well. And you can apply that, it's so soft you can apply it with your hands, honestly. Yes, the DIY wax is very, very nice also. So, I mean, it really just comes down to preference. I like different brands for different reasons. With Dixie Belle paint, I feel like it dries to more of a water-resistant finish because it has a built-in top coat to it. So if you take water and you try to reactivate it later, it really takes a lot of water to reactivate it and to get it to run, kind of like DIY paint. So the only time that I really blend with Dixie Belle is when it's wet. So I like to have a lot of water to blend it. I don't like to let it dry and then try to reactivate it, because it's just not going to reactivate the same as DIY paint. DIY paint, with it not having that built-in top coat, you can go back days later and you can reactivate it and make it drip and make it blend, which is nice for different reasons. So I mean, each different paint line that I've tried, they have their pros and they have their cons. Dixie Belle for me has been the easiest to use. I still am trying to figure out exactly how to use DIY paint the best for me. But I think for me, what has worked so far with that paint is I will paint on one full base coat, and then I will add a sealer to it, like a polyacrylic sealer, very, very lightly with a very soft brush, just because it does reactivate and you don't want to add too much of that sealer or else it could reactivate the paint and start pulling it back. But I like to do that because when I add my coats over that first base coat, I don't want that first base coat to run off. And so for me, that has worked best with that brand paint. Don't forget your molds. Oh yeah, I have to go check on those. If you reactivate easily, then you'd have to use a top coat. Yes, so DIY paint, it does, you want a top coat on it, because if you set something wet, or I guess you don't really want to set anything wet on paint anyways, even if it's Dixie Belle or sealed or any other type of paint. But if you do get water on it or any other type of liquid, then it can reactivate that paint. So you do want to seal that paint, whether it's with a wax or a some sort of a top coat. Thank you, Laura, for sharing. I'm going to run real fast and grab my molds. Hopefully they're dry enough, because this is starting to harden just a tiny bit, so hopefully those have sat in the freezer long enough. So give me one quick second. All right, sorry about that. So I'm going to show you the magic of putting it in the freezer. So see, when I bend it away, it comes out of there with no problem. That is why I like using a freezer. I need to get like a little mini freezer or something in my office here, so I don't have to keep leaving the camera out to do this. So it comes right out. And all of that detail is still, I mean, it hasn't messed up any of that detail at all. And it's bendable, so I can put it on some curved surface. It has that like self-adhering factor to it, so I can adhere it to the surface without having to glue it on. So I'm just gonna pop this one out also. There's my keyhole. And again, same thing, it's very bendable. But you want to pull it out of your mold before it starts to warm up, and then it starts to kind of get that same like sticky or clay-like feel to it. So when it's fresh out of the freezer, what I like to do is I'll take a little bit of wax paper, or even like parchment paper, and set it on that. That way it doesn't try to stick and adhere to whatever surface I put it on until I'm ready to put it on my piece. So I'm going to go ahead and do this detail first. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I think this is the most people I've ever had on here. 40 something. Keeps hopping up and down. Okay, so I'm taking this, pull you in just a little bit more so you can see. So this is going right on the corner here. I just want to try to get it centered and then really bend it around the corner. And make sure all of those edges are all sitting on the furniture, so you don't have any areas that are kind of gapped up. When I go back through with paint, you'll be able to see those areas a lot more if you don't go back over and press all of those edges just down slightly. All right, so that is on there good. It's not going to come off at all. It's very, very wet still, so I can't even, I mean, I could take probably a palette knife and peel it back off there if I didn't get it straight, but it may mess up some of that detail, so then you'd have to remix it and re-put it in the mold. But that is on there. It's not going anywhere. I don't have to glue it. I don't have to tape it up. I do have a dog hair in here though, so I'm going to try to get that out carefully. Dogs, their hair gets everywhere. Okay, so now that one is good. It's just gonna sit there dry. It doesn't crack or shrink at all when it's drying, which is very nice. And like I said, it dries to a very, very hard finish. I actually, would you guys like to see a finished piece? Because I have a finished piece that I had in my mold way back when I was first trying Apoxie Sculpt in it. And I can show you like how hard of a finish it dries to if you'd like. Watching from Italy. Wow, Heather, thank you for joining. Let's see here. I missed what you used in your mold. Was it paper clay? Oh. April, it is Apoxie Sculpt. And it's by Vez Studios. And I get this on Amazon. I can post my link once I finish this video. So if anybody wants to order it, this is the 4-pound size, which this is going to go an extremely long ways because I only mixed up about this much paint. I mean, not paint. This much of the Apoxie Sculpt. And I've already done 2 of the molds. That one, and this is going to be probably enough to finish the other 3 of these like leaf looking details. So you can get away with doing the 1 pound, which look like just little containers, but like I said, they do go a very long ways. And I want to say it's about $20 for the 1 pound. I've been molds yet. They're very easy to use. You're welcome, April. All right, so I have that one on there. And what's up here? So I'm going to take my keyhole. I'm just going to make sure that there's no areas where it's sticking out inside of the keyhole. Now this is going to be the challenge, trying to get this centered on here. Does that look pretty centered to you guys? I think that's centered. So the brand molds that I use are the IOD molds. Iron Orchid Design, I believe by Prima Marketing. And so they have a whole wide variety of different ones that you can use. I have the trim piece ones. I have this one, which is kind of like the, I don't know what I would call this, like Greek almost. Like it has like the feathery looking pieces. That's kind of like bubbly and feathery looking. And then I have these ones. So they have all kinds of different ones, like of anything that you would want to do. Yep, that looks good. Okay, perfect. I think. Yes. So I'm just going to do the same and press this on here. There's another dog hair. Alright, so I'm just barely pressing on it because I don't want to mess up any of those details. I just want to make sure that all of it is pressed on there enough to where it's sitting flat and it's going to adhere well to it. Check the difference between them. Yeah, I guess it may be a little bit closer to the top. It's close enough. Once it's all painted up, you really won't be able to tell too much because it's all going to be white. So Terry, it sticks on. You don't have to glue it at all. This has a very hard, self-adhering like quality to it, I guess. Check. Oh, I already read that one. Yes, on the center. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the comments and not get distracted. So I'm going to grab one of my finished pieces that are dry just so I can show you how hard of a finish it comes out to. different ones here. I have this one, which I like to use as a drawer pull. And so you just put a knob right in it, and then you can put it on your piece. Like I said, it does dry extremely hard. So if it's not perfectly flat, I'm not sure if you guys can see that or not, or if you have like a curved surface that you want to put it on, it's not going to sit completely flat on there. It's going to rock back and forth. You can't re-bend it once it's fully dry. So I have something like that. I have this one, which is like a little kind of like bouquets of flowers. And again, like, look how detailed that is. That is fully dry. It did not crack, sorry, it's trying to focus on my face. It did not crack. It did not shrink at all. This is exactly what it was like when I pulled it out of the mold. I just let it dry, and it has that really, really hard, like plasticky kind of feel to it. I am a mess with gluing things too. Oh my gosh. Whenever I try to put like wood glue and hold something together, the wood glue, I'll add too much and then it'll kind of like slide all over. It won't be even and it's a mess. I have wood glue like dripping down and everything else. So this stuff has worked out amazing. And then you can even use it to repair furniture legs. You can use it to fill holes. I had an issue where on a recent buffet that I did, for the doors at the top of the buffet, one of the screws had broken off, and it was like the head of it broke off, but the rest of the screw was inside the wood. So I had to try to dissect it the best I could, and I really tore up the whole area where that screw was because I kind of had to just drill around it. So I had this huge crater to where I could pull the screw out. So then I was stuck with that huge crater. I just used some of this and filled it. And then once this was for the majority dry, I didn't let it dry all the way. I re-drilled a screw through it and it hardened fully around that screw. So you can still remove the screw and put the screw back in, but it's hard. It's the same like as if it was wood. It's a very hard finish. Yes, so once they're fully dry, you would have to glue them just because they dry like very hard. It's just like kind of like plastic, or I don't know what I would consider this, but it has a very hard finish. It's not going to stick to anything. Yes, I do have an affiliate link through Amazon, and as soon as I get off this video, I will post that so you guys can order through there. If you don't mind, it gives me a little bit of credit. It gives me like $1 or something like that, which every bit helps. Yeah, it almost has like a resin type of finish, Laura. Sorry, late joining. What material is that? They're beautiful. Thank you, Nicole. They are Avez Apoxie Sculpt. And so when you order, you get a part A and you get a part B. You want to make sure to use a different glove for each piece or each part, because once you mix them together, they activate. You just mix them 50-50. Just wood glue. So I didn't add any wood glue to this. If they're dry and you wanted to add them later, you can use wood glue. And then you would want to probably at that point use like blue painter's tape or something to hold it on while the wood glue is hardening and setting, because I know with wood glue you really don't need a whole lot and it can kind of start to slide if you put it on a vertical surface. Do I have any other questions real fast? Because I think I've answered quite a bit. So unless you guys have other questions, then I'll probably hop off of here, so I'm not going on here for like 2 hours or anything like that. But I'm just going to do the same with the rest of this. I'm going to add one, and I'm trying to reconnect. Oh, there we go, we're back. Okay, I'm going to add one down here and then two on the other side as well. What glue do you use? So if this was fully dry and I wasn't working with it when it's like clay-like this, then I would use probably, I think it's like Elmer's brand or something like that, wood glue. It was just kind of cheap stuff at Lowe's. You are welcome for the great tutorial. Thank you for saying it was great. Thank you, Lynn. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and hop off. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to either send me a message or comment on here. I'm going to go ahead and post my link as soon as I hop off here. So I will just create a new post on my page. If you're not following my page, feel free to follow it. I like to do a lot of different tutorials between painting, finger painting, DIY type of projects, or even different furniture repairs, stuff that's going to help you guys out as well. You're welcome, Laura. Thank you, Pam. All right, you guys, have a great day.